Now, why does this matter here? Well, there are lots of issues here. One of the issues, of course, is that the religious authorities are always sensitive to pagan forms of religions reasserting themselves. So one of the issues could have been if you make the Earth not at the center of the solar system, but instead you put the sun at the center of the solar system, that can encourage the reintroduction or the rejuvenation of various forms of pagan sun worship, and various forms of paganism are on the church's minds here. But the more important issue here is, I think, an epistemological issue. The issue is, in epistemology, how do we come to know? What authority do we rely on in making up our minds on not just the routine day-to-day things in our lives, but especially the important things in our lives? And the place of ourselves in the cosmos, that is a theologically significant, philosophically significant kind of issue here. And so one of the issues is a theological issue that if we then say the Earth is a satellite around the sun, well, the Earth is then no longer the center of God's creation. The Earth is no longer the center of God's plans for the universe, and it sounds theologically suspect to say that God would create things in such a way that displaces human beings, God's greatest creations, from being at the center of his plans for wherever the universe are. It sounds a little odd to say that he would put them on a putsy planet 93 million miles out from the center of the action, which is now the sun. But also, from the church's perspective, the authority of the church and the authority of Scripture, the Bible, is at stake epistemologically here by the Copernican challenge, because for centuries, the official position signed on by the church hierarchy, including the various popes themselves, had been that the Earth was at the center of God's creation and that all of the other planets and the sun revolved around the Earth. The Scripture and the Bible is itself, the authority of Scripture is at stake because there are various passages in the Bible that one can interpret in support of a geocentric model. For example, Joshua is storming the gates of Jericho. He needs more time for his plan to work, and so he asks God for a miracle, and God delivers a miracle. He causes the sun to stand still in the sky, so there's more daylight for Jericho's plan to work. But if the sun is caused by God in this miraculous circumstance to stand still, the implication is that ordinarily the sun is the thing that is moving, and so you have a passage right there in Scripture that seems to indicate so. But if then the church is wrong about this, if Scripture is wrong about this, and not only that, church and Scripture have been wrong about this for a very long time and have not noticed their own error, and these pesky new generation scientists are coming along and saying, here we have this new way of looking at things, this is how we figure out important truths, and our new important truths about the structure of the cosmos are in conflict with Scripture and the church, then we have a battle over epistemological authority, and the church feels threatened. If the church is wrong about this particular issue, if Scripture is wrong about this particular issue, then that, of course, is the thin edge of the wedge or the slippery slope or whatever metaphor we want to use here. If they're wrong on that, then what else are they wrong on? And then if people start saying, well, then we have to start picking and choosing which passages in Scripture we're going to accept as true and which ones we're going to dismiss as falsehoods or interpret metaphorically, then we're starting to talk like, from the Catholic perspective, those damn Protestants who do exactly that sort of thing, who say that they can come up with their own interpretations of Scripture. And so the church is then feeling beleaguered. It's got an epistemological challenge from the Protestants about biblical interpretation, and it has an epistemological challenge coming from the scientists, these astronomers who want to, using their data and their methods, propose a new hypothesis based on those new methods that are very different from the authoritative tradition as captured in divine revelation captured in Scripture, signed on by the church for many centuries. Therefore, the church decides that it has to make an example of people like Giordano Bruno to send a signal to the wider scientific community not to tread in these theologically fraught waters. Leave it alone. Now, I want to switch the story here to the next chapter, which involves Galileo Galilei, perhaps the most famous of all scientists in this early modern era. At this point here, an Italian scientist, a brilliant man. In 1600, when Giordano Bruno is executed by burning at the stake, Galileo is approaching middle age. He's a respected scientist. has a number of discoveries to his own name, had been working a great deal in terrestrial mechanics, working on issues of gravity, the experiments at the Leaning Tower of Pisa, whether balls of different masses fall at the same rate or not, working out laws of gravitation and so forth. Galileo was responsible for that to a high degree of precision, as well as various mathematical contributions. Now, he had stayed away from astronomical issues, in part because he was interested in other issues, but also because he was very aware of the dangers of entering into those matters, as the execution of Giordano Bruno made amply evident to him. But come 1609 or so, Galileo's attention turns to astronomical issues more systematically. In part, this was spurred by his having heard of a new invention that he'd heard from some travelers coming down from the north, that the Flemish or the Dutch had invented a telescope. That if you take two pieces of glass and grind them and polish them in a certain way, and put them between a long tube, and you point them out to things that are far away, those things that are far away look a whole lot closer. So Galileo was intrigued by this. He was quite handy and skilled, ended up making his own telescope that was very powerful. My understanding, it was more powerful than any of the telescopes that had been made up until that point. And so he made presents of telescopes to various influential figures in Venice and so forth. There are commercial applications to the use of telescopes. But also Galileo then started looking at various astronomical bodies, starting in 1609. And in 1610, he published his notebooks recording his observations of what he saw, looking at the moon, looking at new stars that people had never seen before, and looking more closely